Is the U.S. economy ready for a cut in interest rates? Well, Fed Chair Jerome Powell says, yes, it may be time. Just a short time ago, the head of the U.S. Central Bank gave a keynote to an annual gathering of central bankers and economists. This happens every year in Wyoming. Powell said, quote, "The time has come for policy to adjust." He also said that it's possible for the U.S. economy to pull off a so-called soft landing. That's when inflation is contained without a sharp rise in unemployment, essentially avoiding a recession. Joining us now from New York with more is CNN's Matt Egan. So, Matt, what stood out to you most about Powell's speech? The time has come, I think, where the words heard around the world. What else can you tell us about the speech?
Well, Rahel, this is a big moment. I mean, for the last 2 years, the Fed has been going all out to try to fight inflation, right? Those monster interest rate hikes designed to get prices back under control. And today, Jerome Powell, he all but declared victory over inflation, saying that his confidence has grown, that inflation is going back where it belongs, right? Back to 2%. And he's made clear that the strategy here has shifted. The mission has shifted, right? They're going from fighting inflation to fighting unemployment. And so that means they've got to use different tools. Instead of interest rate hikes, they're going to be doing interest rate cuts. Powell made that clear today. Take a listen to the key line from the speech.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. We will do everything we can to support a strong labor market as we make further progress toward price stability.
So the direction of travel is clear, and he said everything we can to support a strong labor market. So that's pretty black and white. He really didn't hedge much there. And he even went further when he talked about his concerns around the jobs market. He noted that while the unemployment rate is historically low, it's unmistakable that the jobs market has cooled off. And he said Fed officials, they would not welcome any further cooling here. So, Rahel, you put all this together, and he effectively pre-announced an interest rate cut in September.
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt. That caught my attention when he said, we do not seek nor welcome any further loosening in the labor market, which, I think signals they get it, they're watching, they don't want to see any further weakening, as they say, in the labor market. Matt, what does this mean for the chances for a rate cut in their meeting just a few weeks from now in September?
Well, Rahel, before Powell started speaking, it was 100% priced into the market that the Fed would be cutting interest rates in September. It remains that way, but the question, of course, is by how much? And so I was just looking a few moments ago, and there's basically a 2 in 3 chance that the Fed does a small interest rate cut, its first since COVID, of 1/4 percentage point. But Powell, he basically kept alive the possibility that they could do a bigger cut of 0.5 percentage point, because if he wanted to, he could have pushed back against that thinking today, and he really didn't. So the market is still pricing in about a 1 in 3 chance of that larger cut. I think the other big thing that came out of this speech is this question about whether or not the Fed can pull off a soft landing. And Powell did address that. He said that there's no reason to think that the economy is going to continue to weaken, that the jobs market is going to significantly weaken from here. And he also said that the Fed has room to cut interest rates further if needed to address any sort of weakening in the jobs market. I mean, he basically alluded to the fact that they have a lot of firepower here. When interest rates are above 5%, they can do a lot of cutting if they need to. And he's basically signaling that they're prepared to if that's what it takes to make sure that this is indeed a soft landing. Rahel?
Yeah, it's interesting, Matt. Mohamed El-Erian, of course, who you know well, a prominent economist, told me a few weeks ago that he expects the Fed's benchmark interest rate to be about 2 percentage points lower within 12 months. So to your point about there's room to go. There is a lot of room for them to play. I'll just say really quickly that investors also liking what they heard. The Dow's up more than 400 points, almost a cool 500 points after that meeting just a short time ago. Matt Egan, good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rahel.
Let's take a look at how Wall Street is reacting to these remarks by Fed Chair Jerome Powell coming the last hour. So you see a little evening out a little bit more here. We did see a little bit of a spike after Powell said the time has come for policy to adjust. Boy, talk about those words getting a lot of reaction. This, of course, happening during his eagerly awaited address at the annual meetup for central bankers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Of course, it's not just central bankers paying close attention. Investors were too, and frankly, a lot of Americans, because they know how much is riding on this speech and what it could signal in terms of a potential rate cut coming their way. I want to bring back my colleague, Julia Chatterley, the anchor of CNN's First Move. Well, I would say we don't really have to read between the lines there. Seems pretty clear, Julia.
Yeah, the time for policy changes is nigh, and that they will cut rates in September. And I agree with you. He literally couldn't have made that policy pivot clearer. Just listen to this.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
So that signaled the first rate cut in more than 4 years. In fact, again, as we were talking earlier, we don't know how big that cut's going to be, but the assumption from what he said, 1/4 percentage point if all else stays the same. We also don't know what it means in terms of the path of rate cuts. And as he said, we're data and risk dependent. But one of the other things he made really clear, and I think this is important to point out, that inflation is no longer their number one issue, but that they don't want to see any further weakness in the jobs market. Just listen to this.
We do not seek or welcome further cooling in labor market conditions. Overall, the economy continues to grow at a solid pace, but the inflation and labor market data show an evolving situation. The upside risks to inflation have diminished, and the downside risks to employment have increased.
So in English, this means that the August payrolls report is going to be critical. If that's weaker than expected, similar to what we saw for last month, then it will open the door to perhaps a 0.5 percentage point rate cut. We'll also watch the jobless claims very closely. And of course, the other wild card, as we were discussing earlier, is the presidential election. And we were correct. He didn't mention that. One thing, though, that I do want to point out very quickly for at least one of the presidential candidates, Powell talked about a moment 2 years ago when they realized that inflation wasn't transitory. It was too high, and they had to cause considerable pain by raising interest rates in order to bring it back under control. And he said they didn't flinch in the face of that. Just listen to this.
The FOMC did not flinch from carrying out our responsibilities, and our actions forcefully demonstrated our commitment to restoring price stability. We raised our policy rate by 425 basis points in 2022 and another 100 basis points in 2023. And we've held our policy rate at its current restrictive level since July 2023.
And caused a lot of pain for consumers and borrowers in the process, Erica. And it's far harder for a politician to make that call, which is why you keep monetary policy and government separate and independent.
An important note. Julia, appreciate it as always, and always appreciate the translation, my friend, too. Thank you.